Chelsea, are you up to speed as to why we're having this bonus meeting? I know you were out last time.
I was a little confused, but I caught the agenda. We're just doing our working group, but I apologize. I am working in a bunch of primary campaigns across the country, and we had a election emergency last meeting, so I had to miss.
I understand. Steve says he'll be on in a few minutes. I think since we have a quorum, we can get started. So Jenny, are we going through our usual meeting format?
Yes, and if you'd like, I can let you know the first item of business is a roll call. So
okay.
We can go through that really quick.
Okay.
And all you need to do is say aye or here or yes as I read off the list. So I'll start off with the chair, Suzanne Dirksen.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Chelsea Nunnenkamp.
Here.
And Donna Woods.
I'm here.
And Joel Scott is not here at the present, and Steve Ward will be joining us momentarily. And then our council liaisons, Councilmember Russell.
Present.
And Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Present.
And our staff members, Sean Lewis, City Manager.
Present.
And Finance Director, Maria Sabata.
Present.
Okay. So the next order of business is the approval of minutes.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. And Jackie, can you just make sure that Steve has the link to the meeting?
She's off the line, but I'll send her an email real quick.
Okay, or send it to Steve or what have you. He sent via text, it's either buried in his inbox or he either can't find it or he didn't receive it.
Okay.
So since we were on COVID hiatus for so many months, we kind of need to hit the ground running with our annual report. So I thought, well, not me personally, but I think the purpose of this meeting is to compile ideas and come up with 3 to 5 items to speak to on our annual report. And you know, Joel had the good idea of compiling 2 or 3 takeaway points from each meeting we had over the last year, and as a group deciding what we want to present to council this summer. So I don't know if you, Donna or Chelsea, have anything that you want to share or highlight for this discussion.
Suzanne, I misunderstood what we were doing tonight. So I thought that we were simply going to have a quick meeting to split into committees, subcommittees, so that each subcommittee could then, develop these ideas to bring back to our group meeting, so that we could then establish our bullet points for the report at our regularly scheduled meeting the end of this month. So I'm sorry, but I'm not prepared with with any items to bring forward tonight.
That's okay. And I don't think, we certainly did talk about developing subcommittees, so I don't think you're off base or ill-prepared. I just thought that might be a good starting point for us to move forward with. Sorry, my phone Steve's reaching me by phone, so I'm just trying to, should be in. Steve's trying to connect. Yeah, so I don't know. I thought we could talk about some topics and then break off to subcommittees from there, because there's always going to be topics that some of us feel more passionate about than others. Um,
I apologize. I missed the last meeting. I mean, municipal budgets seem to be in a very different place than the last time we were all together.
mhm.
A lot has happened in the last couple of months. And so did you guys discuss just like fundamentally rethinking everything?
No, we didn't talk about that. So Manager Lewis went over the strategic plan. And then we also heard from Director DeAndrea about all things public works. So that consumed most of the meeting, and then we just talked about next steps, including setting this meeting up. So what we can do is just, I mean, the three of us can just assign a subcommittee and we can take it from there.
Madam Chairman, can I jump in on
Please.
Chelsea's question? Thank you. I did want to see maybe Maria, if you could spend, of course, Jenny, you could do the same thing, but just spend a few minutes to address Chelsea's question with regard to whether or not, in fact, we have fundamentally changed based on the revenues that we're seeing. Could you just give the thumbnail sketch that you've been giving City Council lately? That might be helpful.
I would be happy to do that. Do you recommend that I use the presentation that I shared yesterday?
Sure.
Okay. If everyone can just give me a second to make sure I can find the presentation.
Okay. And while you pull that, Jenny, can we confirm if the link made it to Steve? Please.
I just called Jackie. Oh, here's Steve. He's on right now.
Oh, good.
There's always one. I'm sorry to say I was that one tonight. Sorry, guys.
Bear with me just a moment. So this is Maria. I'm in the process of trying to locate a presentation that I gave yesterday that would provide an overview in response to some questions that were just asked regarding the budget. Bear with me, please. If I can find it. If not, I'll just start speaking. There it is. All right, bear with me.
I think they're.
I know. My camera, I know. Oh, I know. Yesterday I showed everybody my lunch. We do need humor during these times sometimes, right? All right. So I'll share this. Can you see it?
Yes.
Does that look better? Can you see the full screen? I've got so much on my computer, bear with me. I'm just gonna get rid of some of the stuff that I've got open.
No, we only see the presentation screen, Maria.
Oh, can't you see it?
No, we can, but we can't see anything else except for the presentation screen.
Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, good. All right. Yesterday I had an opportunity to give an update to city staff, and I combined information that I've been sharing over the past several weeks with council regarding a 2020 update and a 2021 budget overview. And I spoke with council at the end of April and actually shared information related to where we were through April collections with 33.3% of the fiscal year complete. We are currently at approximately 33.9 of budgeted revenue. And the primary reason for this are, it's actually twofold. Number one, I think I've mentioned that Englewood has diverse businesses in comparison to municipalities around us. And so we have weathered the storm pretty nicely through April. However, you know, as things progress with COVID, you know, there's a possibility that, you know, this wouldn't, some decline. So diverse businesses is one of the components that has helped work in our favor. The second thing that I'll mention is that in the month of April, we did several audit payments for audits that had been ongoing for the past several months and some over a year. And so those were also very helpful in offsetting any shortfalls that we experienced midway, through for March, half a year or half of the month for March, and then April. The area where I see some significant shortfall, and you can see it here, is in Parks and Rec.
Actually, Maria,
Sorry?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we actually did lose the screen. I mean, now we just see your home screen.
Really?
Can you push show presentation or?
Here, I'll do it again. Thanks for telling me that. I moved it over. That's might be why. Oh.
We're good now.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I was trying to make it better for me and I made it worse for you. I apologize. So Parks and Rec, you can see that lagging significantly behind in revenues, and that was certainly one of the considerations that I made in the original estimate that I shared of a shortfall of approximately $1.6 million. This actually shows the sales and use tax in comparison that we've collected. May's number actually shows the May revenue, so it would have been April's business, not April collections, but actual experience in April. So you can see for May revenue, with 93.3% of the returns submitted at the time that I showed this to council, we were tracking behind for the first time actually January was behind as well, but just on a lower basis as it related to COVID. And with this figure, we are still closing the books, but I would think that where we'll end up is approximately 150,000 behind in sales and use tax revenue for the month. But again, still year to date, we'll be tracking ahead because of those audit collections. So we were 500,000 ahead in sales and use tax at the end or for our April financial report. So we've cut into that lead a little bit. So we're starting to see that decline. So it all depends on how things ramp up, how we'll be impacted going forward. So I'm sticking with the original estimate as we are working towards the continuation of this pandemic. And as I mentioned, I think in previous conversations, I spoke about the fact that directors did find approximately $1.1 million worth of savings that they are working towards. And so the difference between our shortfall in revenue and our operating expense reduction, you can see that for 2020, I'm estimating an overall shortfall of approximately 418,000 that we'll either need to close the gap, as we progress through the year, or we would come to council and ask for a supplemental appropriation to cover that. Moving into 2021, how that impacts us, if our revenues are behind by 3%, which is our current projection, we're already starting, off of a modified lower base. And if you apply an estimated increase of 3%, which is what our economic indicators are suggesting, and we also assume that expenditures, we might see some inflation. So we're assuming approximately 2.5% expenditure inflation rate. We are looking at potentially a gap of $1 million as we're moving forward. Where I think this is different than previous years, to answer the specific question, is the uncertainty. I think that's the most challenging piece of this puzzle. We are still moving ahead with these projections as we build our bottom line or bottoms up budgets and our line item detail. And we're going to have to see over the next couple of months how things progress, how things start to open up, and really have trends to base a realistic 2021 estimate off of. So that's, I think, what is the most challenging piece, is that we may move down a path and have to adjust midstream. But we'll be coming back to council many times, and certainly I'm willing to talk, with all of you every month as we move forward through this process to give you updates and what we're presenting to council. and have an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have. They did, we are moving forward with the revised $5 million list for capital. That's the other component of all of this. So we have, a list that we're going with. But again, as we move forward, there might be some things that come onto the list or are taken off. That's typical in our process. So we're really not following a different process. We're just dealing with some uncertainties that perhaps in the past we didn't have. And we're also entering the year, I think, with a shortfall that we just need to keep in mind. So as we work with the departments, we're talking about bottom-up builds with budgets that support the programs that we want to move forward with in 2021, and incorporate the increases where we need to, such as medical benefits, and also just our contract with Denver Fire. We've got an automatic 3% increase there. So all of those things do put pressure on the discretionary spend that would be available for other programs. So I'll take a breath and see if there's questions just based on the information that I've shared so far.
I have one question, Maria, which is, as of right now, what is the projected reserve above policy at the end of this current year?
I have that information. Just flip ahead. You all have seen these. These were slides that we showed last year that I showed to council again of the composition of the sources. So I believe this is what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. So currently, excluding the loan that that the council approved for stormwater, above and beyond that and our reserve policy of 16.7% of revenues, there is $8.6 million estimated to be in the fund balance and unassigned fund balance at the end of the year.
And one thing that is not quite clear to me is that loan that we are giving to the stormwater fund. Have we set a payback schedule for that loan?
The expectation is that the payback would come when the bond is issued. And so to date, I don't have the exact number that council has approved for the design phase, but it is not even close to the 3 million. If we don't move forward, then we would, the repayment would be made from the revenues that the Stormwater Fund has. There's no schedule, but that's the expectation.
We could see a stormwater bond as early as 2021, theoretically.
Yes.
Depending on when they decide to break ground on the project. So in 2021, it's possible that that year could see an additional $3 million surplus that wasn't anticipated by the 2021 projections.
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure I'm square on my understanding there.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
This is really cool. Thank you so much for walking us through it. It definitely informs our decision significantly, understanding where the city's at. So thanks for doing that. Suzanne, do you have a list? I know when we met a few months ago now, we had a list of things we were thinking about. Can you just give us a refresher? I know 4th of July was on there, some Parks and Rec stuff.
I have an incomplete list in front of me, but I'm sure the four of us can come up with something more complete. 4th of July, Public Works. Those were the ones that I came up with. And then this came up just this week with the study session, but in a usual meeting, I'd want to talk about the decision to fund police cams. I don't know that we need to talk about it as a group at this time, but I don't know if anybody listened to that meeting, but I think that's notable as well.
So I think police cams is a topic that's ripe for discussion in this year's report. It's something that I support, and I think that as citizens, that's probably going to be useful for council. One of the things that we haven't discussed thus far that I would really like to add to this year's report is this concept of transferring general fund money to enterprises. I'll just go on record right now as saying this is something that I adamantly object to. I believe that enterprises should be supported with fees, and that just because we can transfer up to 10% of their revenue annually does not mean that we should. General fund money was collected for a specific purpose, which is to support the general funds, and enterprises should be charging a fee that's high enough to support themselves. I don't object to loaning money to enterprises. I object to giving money to enterprises.
I think you just became the head of a subcommittee for that very topic.
Well, that would only be if I can secure majority agreement from the group. So I'd just like to take a little mini poll at this point and see if there are any objectors to that concept or if everyone is in agreement.
Steve, is there an enterprise specifically that you're concerned about?
Well, I'm concerned about the possibility that all of them will be receiving money. But the one that specifically concerns me at the moment is water, which is estimated to have a $160 million liability for capital infrastructure. And we're talking about transferring maybe $800,000 into it. One thing that I didn't address in my earlier statement is that if that money that we send to the enterprise is used to offset fee increases for vulnerable ratepayers, I would potentially be okay with that. But if it's just supplementing the enterprise's viability, I don't think it's doing enough to be effective, and I think there are better places where it could be used.
For me, I'm probably not in a place to give you an opinion tonight, but if you have any information that you'd like to send my way to sway my opinion, please send me an email.
Sure. Donna, I see you smiling, but I don't hear you saying anything.
Oops, what did I do? I would agree with Chelsea that that's the first time I've heard of that idea. And so I would need to digest that a little more and take a look at it. But I was thinking these were the kinds of things that we would do as subcommittees and bring them then back and saying, as a subcommittee, we've met, we've discussed these particular areas, and here's what we're bringing back to the whole committee and provide the basis for why we're suggesting those things, be added to the report. So that's kind of what I thought we were doing, so that then, we could discuss them as a full committee at, as I said, at our regularly scheduled meeting, the end of the month.
And Steve or Suzanne, I'm sure you guys both know this on top of your head. Can you remind us when this is due? Is it July or is it August?
Typically, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically we like to have the draft completed by end of July. That's why you were
Yes.
That's why you were so lucky to have the opportunity to review and submit a report that represents a committee that you had joined, a week prior last year.
Yeah,
I'd like to set ambitious goals because that allows us some wiggle room to play catch up if we need to.
I think doing some divide and conquer tonight makes sense. I think,
Yeah.
and then preparing maybe some briefing materials and then bringing it back to this group at our next regularly scheduled meeting. I think out of the list of things that you mentioned, Suzanne, I think they all still deserve conversation and merit. And given where we understand the city being at this point, respective of all the unknowns, we're going to have to address the 4th of July question again in 2021.
Yeah.
So we may as well continue with that one. And I think
Well, maybe you and I can be a subcommittee for 4th of July.
I'd be happy to. That's
Any objections to that, Steve, Donna?
No objections to that.
Okay. Yeah, and the divide and conquer approach, that's what we've done the last few years, which seems to work pretty well. Yeah, I'd like to put a blurb in there for police cam. So if you haven't listened to the meeting, Chief Collins spoke at the study session on Monday. is proposing that the department acquires cameras and the technology and the staffing to support that technology. And if you had asked me a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have thought it was so important. If you had asked me 6 months ago, I'd be more in favor of this. It's not, I haven't changed my tune just because of the events over the last week or two. It's just more, the more I learn about our police department and, you know, about they have a review committee and what have you. And I just think our department can benefit from that. So I don't know, I would encourage you to listen to the study session, see how you feel about it. If you feel strongly against the idea, let me know. Otherwise, I'd like to move forward with putting a blurb in our annual report, and I'm happy to own that.
I haven't listened to the study session, but I don't have an objection.
Okay.
I definitely don't either. That was something that, you know, obviously that was one of the things I wanted to know, whether or not our police force were using body cams and what the protocol was for their use.
Yeah, they're not. And it was really interesting. The city attorney said that of all the municipalities she's worked for, this is the only one that does not have cameras. So that was really validating.
May I suggest, Suzanne, that you and Chelsea as a subcommittee take the 4th of July and the body cam issue and come back, you know, prepared with your statements with regard to those things and the whys and wherefores, and we'll look at I haven't looked at that study session, and I'll take a look at that. And maybe Steve, you'd be willing to work with me on a subcommittee, and we could take your concerns about the transferring general fund money to enterprises, and maybe we could pick up the public works piece too. What other pieces are there, Suzanne, Steve?
I think the other thing that came up throughout the year were some of the Parks and Recs and communications-led events. You know, they overlap. Some are Parks and Recs, some are communications. But speaking to which ones we need to keep alive, speaking to which ones benefit the city, and which ones we might need to put on hold until we're in a better place financially once we recover from the economic impacts of COVID. So maybe what I can do is we can reach out to Joel and see if he wants to speak to any of those.
I would like to see our report this year address Parks and Rec. I think it's a ripe time to discuss it. Parks is going to be one of the challenging budget lines going into 2021 because Parks revenues are down. When you close facilities, you don't get revenue from them. So I really think that's something that we should be talking about philosophically as far as how much do we want to supplement or support the Parks budget? How is this an appropriate use of reserves? What would we like to do going forward? That kind of thing, I think would potentially be very helpful in crafting the 2021 budget.
Yeah, and I think that's in alignment with segments of the strategic plan when we talk about healthy communities and walkability. And you know, I don't have that in front of me, but there are several line items in the strategic plan that go hand in hand with a vital Parks and Rec department. So I would agree with you on that point.
Then I liked your idea too of, you know, as Maria shared, there's a lot of unknowns right now, and we saw this trend from April revenue and that was reported in May, and kind of not sure what's going to happen. So maybe presenting a list of like, this is if you had to start cutting community events, this is where we would start as citizens of the community. I think that actually would probably be a really unique and useful role for this type of committee.
Yeah.
And I think that could be beneficial. So I would support that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I say it all the time. It's a matter of evaluating the return on investment, and sometimes that return is not necessarily financial. Or it is a financial return on investment, but indirectly so. And I think of the block party when I say that, where the block party in and of itself doesn't necessarily bring in revenue that at the event, but over the long term as it introduces the community to our downtown area. So, yeah, so I would propose reaching out to Joel, and we can see if that's something that he wants to take. And then I think we've assigned our, and see how he feels about that, or if he wants to jump on something else, and I can work that out with him. But I think we have our subcommittee and our topics.
Oh,
Oh, there's Joel.
What do you think?
Hi, I just wanted to add that I didn't hear from Steve whether he was interested in us in working with the subcommittee with me. He's okay with that. Okay, and then I was going to say, if Parks and Rec is one of the topics, you know, my recent professional experience is in Parks and Rec. That's where I worked the last almost decade. So maybe Steve and I could take Parks and Rec and the enterprise, the general fund, you know, that area, and maybe perhaps Joel would be interested in the public works piece. Steve?
Still connecting. I'll give him a minute to.
Any comments there, Steve?
That sounds actually really, really good. I was going to try to take a chunk out of that Parks and Rec just because I worked over the last year with the group Friends of Inglewood Parks, and circumstances changed and a lot of stuff happened, but I'd still like to talk a little bit more about the long-term health of our parks and recreation department and library.
Awesome. Does that sound good to you, Suzanne, that Steve and I as a subcommittee take that area?
Yeah, I like the idea of you having your say in that, Donna, considering your experience. Yeah.
Yay.
Joel, can you hear us?
I can hear you. It's not letting me start my video. I am so sorry, guys. For some reason, this went to my spam account.
We can see you, though, so that's good. I can see you.
My video is disabled. All right. Well, I'm glad you can see me. I'm so
we'll
sorry.
just go
guys.
with it.
All right.
So I'll try to summarize what we talked about, and fellow members, please chime in if I misstate anything. So some of the topics that we talked about for the annual report are Parks and Rec, excuse me, the 4th of July event, cameras, body cams for the police department. This is new as of this week. The transfer of general fund dollars to enterprise funds, and my notes are scattered. What did I leave out?
What was the concerns with public works?
Hey, oh, that comes up every year. Basically street and alley maintenance. That's often a topic of discussion. So with respect to subcommittees, Joel, chime in if something piques your interest or if there's something you'd like to add, but Chelsea and I would get together to speak to police cams and the 4th of July event. Joel and Donna would, or excuse me, Steve and Donna would connect to speak about Parks and Rec and maybe community events. And then Steve and Donna would also get together to speak about the transfer of general fund dollars to enterprise funds. So I may have spit a lot at you, but if there's something you want to bring up that's not included in that list, or if you want to tag team with one of the—
Are you guys still able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure what's up. Yeah, I'm happy to hop on whatever is left, I suppose. I think all those topics sound wonderful. Where do you need me?
And just a point of clarification, when you say Parks and Rec, does that include kind of the assessment of community events, or should that be its own thing separate from?
Well, I think it's both, and it's both. together and separate, because there is parks maintenance and rehabilitation, like Steve has been involved with over the last year with Friends of Inglewood Parks. And then when I speak about it, I think of community events that are both led by Parks and Rec and others that are led by communications.
I wonder if that would just be like a good one for Joel to take. Joel, we were talking about so far the COVID impact on the municipal budget has been okay. It's not earth-shattering, but there is a decline with a lot of unknowns. And so we were talking about maybe an interesting portion to include in the report would be an assessment of community events. And if the cuts were needed in 2021, where do we think that those should happen? And so I wonder if that would be an interesting one to put together, because it's a crossover of Parks and Rec and communications.
Sure. Yeah.
Park maintenance. I don't know if you think that's a good idea, Suzanne.
I think whatever people want to get their hands in is okay with me.
So we're thinking community events that includes block party, concerts, 4th of July.
Not 4th of July, because that'll be handled in a separate bucket.
Okay, so concerts, block party.
We have a list from a previous
Yeah, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I'll go back and look. That's perfect.
holiday bazaar, all that stuff.
Cool.
Is it out of school for instance, if we were wanting to suggest which or make some recommendations in terms of which community events might be eliminated if there were budget constraints necessitating that, would it be appropriate for us to just take a casual poll like on Nextdoor or some social media avenue, or maybe or putting something on the city website asking people to chime in, or is that something we're just going to in an isolated way make these recommendations?
So I don't want to be that guy, but I understand the spirit of that suggestion. There is, however, a history in the city of people seeing questions like that being asked and flipping out as if it's going to happen.
Okay.
I think that is a very dangerous possibility of something like that, and I would urge caution on that.
Well, there may have actually been a recent survey around this. What if it could be framed along the lines of which community events do you enjoy, which have you participated in, that sort of thing, rather than, so we can get a sense of the community areas of interest and kind of keep it on the more positive side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's
binary and quantitative and qualitative, perhaps. I'm thinking about it. I think there's pros and cons to the approach. I don't have much to say about it, but I'm thinking.
I mean, would it have to be formal? I mean, could Joel just independently, just go out on Nextdoor and say,
I am not touching Nextdoor.
Yeah, and that's what worries me is I'm thinking about Nextdoor because there is a small but vocal few who could very much sway the results of such a survey.
Hijack that.
So
okay.
I really like the idea of a community survey, but when I heard Nextdoor, I cringed a little bit because I just don't know if that's the platform we're looking for.
Right.
And that's why I'm thinking, I'm not trying to poo-poo the idea. I think it's a great idea.
And I don't even know that it does have merit. I mean, are there other avenues of reaching? Is there another platform that reaches out to the Inglewood community?
Very recently, there was that survey about the closing down the one block of Broadway. They used a new, I don't know much about the platform, but it looked nice.
Madam Chairman, I can speak to that if you'd like.
Please.
Yeah, so the city, and in conjunction with a couple of good suggestions from Councilmember Wink, has recently started using a survey tool called Polco. POLCO, I believe. And so we have had hundreds of people that have registered to respond to those surveys and have had good results from those. So we are rolling that out for regularly for different purposes, and are glad to for you all to have access to that service for your own survey purposes.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, I would want to coordinate with you guys so that we don't take advantage of it or, you know, burn people out on the platform. But yeah, I would love to talk about what that could look like.
Great. Jenny can get in touch with Chris Hargeth. He's our communications director, and we'll be glad to, he can come and talk to you about it. But certainly if you simply have questions, Jenny can work with Chris to get those on Polco as soon as needed.
Will do.
So I have some other suggestions. It's been sort of a tradition in this community or committee to weigh in on reserves policy. I find that we often give advice that goes unheeded, but I still like to chip away at that old thing.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second? I'm so sorry. Guys, I'm sorry. I have to jump. I have to go catch a train. But this has been great. Suzanne, we'll coordinate, and I'm so sorry I have to miss it. Sorry, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
So I would like to add at least a blurb on reserves. And I can prepare one of my patented ward rants if nobody wants to work with me on that.
Yeah, has your position on it changed much from last year's write-up?
It has not.
Okay, well then I'm fine. I endorse it.
Yeah, I completely support you if you want to take it and own it, Steve.
And I am totally up for working on with you, Steve, on all of your concerns.
All right. Well, we'll work on that together then, Donna.
Perfect.
In years past, it was Christine McGordy who often softened my somewhat thuggish methods when I would write my drafts.
I think last year's ended up pretty, I think it worked out well. I think you got your point across, but yeah, we did some line edits that helped, took out the thuggishness, as you say.
She once referred to me as inflammatory.
You kept each other well balanced. Okay, so I'll go through this again. Parks, Steve and Donna. Events, item number 2 would be events. That'll be Joel. I'm going to call this 2B, which is 4th of July. And Chelsea and I will take that. Chelsea and I will also draft something on the police cams. Reserves, as we just talked about, Steve and Donna. And then general funds / enterprise funds, also Steve and Donna. Good?
That sounds great to me. I missed the timetable part of it.
The which part?
The timetable.
Oh, I think what I was going to propose is offline, we can reach out to one another and schedule times to connect. And then I guess, so today's June 3rd. Do we have our next meeting scheduled?
Yes, we do. It's still on the calendar for June 23rd.
I'm so glad that I've got smart people on this committee. So we can have some statements drafted by the 23rd and, you know, review it together as a group and then go from there. With the goal of having a final version by the end of July.
Great.
I do have one question for staff, and this may be a question that actually goes for the city attorney. As we're working on these things, we are working on drafts, and I'm wondering about the release to the public of our draft work product, and if there is an exemption or if there isn't. and how that works.
Steve, I'll ask Allison, because I know in the past we did not submit our draft work in front of the public until you were, ready with a working document that you felt comfortable with. So I'll double check with Allison on that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Jenny.
Okay. Did we, oh, go ahead, Donna.
Sorry, I just double checked, and Steve, I have your Gmail address, I hope, bigsteveward@gmail.com. And I will contact you through that with my phone number so we can connect by phone.
Sounds great.
Okay, good.
Good. I was going to ask if there's any other agenda items or if we should go ahead and adjourn. I think we've covered
Doug,
everything.
one thing we might want to talk about as a big group, but if we can recognize some of the organizational and financial accomplishments that have taken place over the last year, even through all the stuff that's happening now, I think that would be a welcome addition to our report.
Okay.
As a citizen, I like to talk as much about the things that I do like happening in the city as the things I don't. And I think that helps better shape the future as well.
I think that's lovely. Has the annual report come out for reference, or I don't know what the timetable is on that sort of thing?
What was the question? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. For my own personal reference, I was wondering if the 2019 annual report had come out, so I could pull from that for some successes as far as events.
That annual report, Joel, it is available on the city website, the
Okay.
2019 annual report.
Great. Thank you.
Oh,
What
and
else?
Steve, I just wanted to chime in and say, I think that's a great idea, and we definitely need to be doing that. Everybody
Absolutely.
needs to be encouraged, and we definitely want to underline the great things that are happening in the city.
Yeah, and I think it's validating too. I think it validates our concerns and suggestions when we also recognize the things that are going right. Good idea, Steve. And I would propose that our entire group contributes to that section.
I agree.
Okay.
Just something to be thinking about as we go forward and we work on these other asks.
So then you're thinking that would be a separate component of the report rather than like including like Parks and Rec successes in the Parks and Rec section and things like that? It would be one solid chunk of the report.
What I'm hearing,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, you could bring those to the table for sure. And we can edit as we go along, but I think it is something that we should be prepared to talk about as a whole. And there may be some things that occurred that aren't included in the basic subjects that we're addressing, and we should throw those into that section as well.
That sounds right.
What else? Anything? No?
I'm all set.
Okay.
All set.
Jenny, we didn't have any other agenda items, right?
No, just members' choice.
Thank you. Do we want to have a member's choice? Is there anything non-annual report that we should discuss? Donna?
I covered it in my brief rant about enterprise
Yeah.
funds, so I'm
just going to go left to right as to who I see on my screen. Donna, anything?
No, I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. Joel?
I'm good to
No.
go.
Okay. And Steve, you said you're good. Okay.
Yep.
I think this was really productive. Thanks everyone. And thanks everyone for keeping me on track and being very
I'm
engaged.
so sorry about missing this, guys. Won't happen again.
not last.
You were no
not
longer in the
last.
spam.
Thank you,
so
Joel.
No
it's,
problem. And I think you have the best Zoom background I've seen during the
Yeah.
work from home months.
I'm on the basement ping pong table. So,
I like it.
Way to use the space, Joel.
Yeah.
Gotta capitalize. My husband's upstairs he has his kitchen table desk, so I get the basement.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna say we can adjourn and let city staff continue with their evenings.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.